whether really Africa is in a position to be able to utilize these minerals by themselves. We are going to utilize our minds first to be able 40% of the gold reserves is in Africa. Why is Africa a very important factor in this conversation? Do you manufacture electric vehicles? Issue of governance. All right, thank you very much, fellow Africans, and welcome to today's episode of the Change for African campaign. Fellow Africans, being on Wednesday, it's about our third pillar of the Change for African campaign, which is about the resources that we own as an African continent. And so, fellow Africans, the issue about resources, it is a diverse issue. It is an issue that we have spoken countless times, trying to leverage on different areas of resources in Africa, just to try to see the diverse, immense resource that Africa owns as a continent. Putting in mind that we hold a very huge share of the world's resources, immense of them. With examples of gold, we actually in Africa we have 40% of the gold reserves is in Africa. And then you can't even speak about cobalt, because cobalt, we are at in the matter of supply, Africa accounts to about over 70% of the global supply of cobalt is from Africa, more specifically from the Democratic Republic of Congo, one of the most insecure countries, ironically, in Africa and in the world, because people are fighting because of our minerals, and that is cobalt and many more minerals. Remember, DRC is very rich of resources and everything. And so, fellow Africans, today also be very quick about some of these things. So some of the very areas of focus is that whereby we have nearly 90% of the chromium and platinum, nearly 90% of chromium and platinum is from Africa. And Africa actually accounts for a third of the world's non-critical supply, critical mineral supply is from Africa. And putting in mind also that what we call the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, estimates that by 2050 we have these three critical minerals. We have nickel, we have cobalt, and then we have lithium. That there is an estimate that by 2050, actually, the demand for these three minerals, an example for nickel will have doubled. Actually, the demand for nickel will have doubled by 2050, and then the demand for the other, what is this, for cobalt will actually be 10 times, not be 10 times, but will have tripled now, from nickel doubling, and then cobalt tripling, and then the last but not least is lithium now be 10 times in the global, it will be on demand now. Those are some of the minerals. And then you ask yourself, why is Africa a very important factor in this conversation? Because looking at statistics is that Africa holds a very substantial amount of these minerals that we speak about. So you can't say that Africa cannot be listed here, or Africa is not very critical in such conversation, because putting in mind that if this demand, actually most of this is from people demand this from Africa, and you can know all the way that resources are extracted from Africa, either illegally or legally, to these areas. And the very question of concern is what are the uses of these minerals? Mostly these minerals are used in these such industries. We have the medicine sector industry, we have the industry of military and airspace, we have the industry of manufacturing or motor industry, whereby the electric vehicles, such minerals, the manufacture of these devices, the laptops and the phones and all these such devices. So this is what they use. And then how is this then judging us that Africa would do not either produce of those? When you speak about nuclear energy, we have no relation with that. Do we produce nuclear energy? No. If someone may be starting to try, do we actually manufacture laptops? No, because our cobalt is mined here in DRC, taken to China, a huge portion of it taken to China to manufacture laptops and phones, and then they are brought back. Do we manufacture electric vehicles? Nowhere near that. So you see, And actually they cannot, these people, what they do, they cannot sell back things that they've not gotten minerals from our continent. So they come, take minerals, go manufacture these things, and then bring them back. So it's a big question of whether really Africa is in a position to be able to utilize these minerals by themselves. Because looking at the demand, it means that these people will come back to Africa, meaning that if we are not very keen on how to see how we can depend on ourselves, the states will continue to be the same. We will continue to be importers instead of being actually exporters. It should be actually be a 50-50 thing, whereby maybe if you export this, then we are importing this, or if you import this, you export this. But then the huge burden is laid on our import. We import so much, and we import so much because I term it laziness. Most of the governance and most of the countries in Africa, or the African continent as a whole, is not ready actually to invest in industries that can be able to utilize this immense resources in form of minerals in our industries to be able to manufacture our own devices. We have not been able to invest in the requisite technology to be able to see how they can utilize these resources, how these resources can be turned into meaningful things that other places of the world are doing. We have so many things that are happening across the world that Africa has never tried, for sure. So looking at this, we still have it is still a very great issue of concern, for Africa, that if you're not very keen, still the game continues to be the same. Because this is an estimate by 2015, some a mineral like cobalt will be needed 10 times in demand. What does that mean? DRC will continue to be a hub, to be an extraction hub, DRC, because of cobalt, because they have immense of that. Speaking about nickel, speaking about lithium, you go to South Africa, you go to Zimbabwe, you go to just this many countries, mostly in the southern part of Africa. You go even in Tanzania, we have these critical minerals, and some of these minerals are not actually well negotiated. Rather, some wars are implicated or incorporated in this area, such that they destabilize the environments of these areas. And then in wars it is very difficult, so they find serene environments for themselves to be able to extract illegally these minerals and then export them to their own countries. So it is still an issue of concern, and wait and see what Africa should do, because the youth have to embrace this, that as we go into the future, as the youth of Africa, from all the respective 54 sovereign states and more of Africa, let us grow with the mind that because many of the youth many of these have been raised up in poverty environment. And poverty, why? It's actually something that does not start from this youth, because they do not choose maybe to be born in such countries and in such conditions, but it's an issue of governance, that as they grow, they should realize that they actually growing to become one of the leaders in their countries, to become responsible, to become expert in different fields. So let us embrace the thing that we have minerals, and we have to figure out how we are going to utilize our minds first to be able to understand how critical these minerals are to us and for the general benefit of our countries in Africa. So therefore, fellow African, it is our obligatory concern to make sure that we preserve, that we appreciate and utilize our minerals. How do you utilize our resources? By making sure that instead of exporting raw minerals to other countries, instead of exporting raw resources to other countries, let us first try and build requisite conditions in Africa to be able to absorb these minerals, manufacture our own components or devices or whatever it is, or start our own industries, to be able to run, to be able to manufacture, to be able to process such the immense minerals that we have as an African continent. So therefore, fellow Africans, allow me to wish you a blessed afternoon. Let's meet tomorrow probably, of course, as we discuss about our fourth pillar of the Change for African campaign. Now, fourth pillar is always about the living standards for people in Africa. Fellow Africans, thank you and have an interesting afternoon.